Awesome. Hello, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Angelina Hong, and I'll be moderating this event presented with Jeanie. So as everybody is starting to flow in, please feel free to comment in the chat box, either if you're on Facebook Live, if you're on Zoom, just saying hello, where you're tuning in from. We'd love to see where you guys are all at right now. Okay, good. Yay, we have somebody local. I'm from San Francisco. And Jeanie, where are you tuning in from?
Raleigh. Yeah, I should say that. Raleigh, North Carolina.
Awesome.
East
Great.
Coast.
Yeah. I know this is midday for us West Coasters, so I'm glad that, people are tuning in. It'll be a really good discussion about mental health, hearing more about Jeanie.
Hey, Tammy. I know Tammy.
So as people are trickling in, I just want to say welcome again. Thank you for joining our Coping with Cultural Confidence Fireside Chat. Feel free to comment in the chat boxes where you're coming in from, where you're tuning in. Feel free to introduce yourself if you feel so comfortable. Definitely want to make this, a very nice and welcoming discussion where you all feel like you are a part of our conversation.
Yeah.
And if anybody has any questions that they weren't able to submit prior, feel free to submit it in the Q&A box if you're tuning in onto Zoom, or in the chat box if you're tuning in on Facebook Live.
See somebody from Oklahoma. Hi, Oklahoma.
Yeah, awesome. Mary from Oklahoma, good. And we'll get started in about 1 minute with just like introductions and getting started with our fireside chat. We just want to let people kind of trickle in more. So just 1 more minute, and feel free, like I said, to comment in the chat box where you're coming in from, how you're feeling, how your days are going. Okay, so we'll be getting started soon with our Coping with Cultural Confidence. Awesome. Yes, Bay Area represent, says Paul. Like I said, I'm tuning in from San Francisco. Jeanie's tuning in from Raleigh.
Raleigh.
So we have both coasts.
East Coasters. Come on, East Coasters.
Awesome. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So I just want to thank everybody again for joining. This is a topic and conversation that is really near and dear to my heart. So I feel very humbled and honored to be able to moderate this with Jeanie. So I'll just introduce myself really quickly first. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Angelina Hong. I'm a photographer and marketing strategist based out of San Francisco, Bay Area, West Coasters. I'm actually originally from Minnesota, so if we have any Midwest people, also represent. I particularly love working with women of color entrepreneurs to tell their authentic story by creating compelling visual content via social strategy and photography to increase sales and confidence. And so, like I said, I'm really deeply passionate about mental health. I've been involved in the field since my freshman year at Stanford University as a peer counselor. And then after that, I was a manager at a mental health nonprofit where we help people with disabilities find work. So I've just always found myself in the field working with, people who struggle with mental health and people who, just closely align with that kind of mission. So very happy to be here today. Really excited to get into a conversation with Jeanie. I'm also going to introduce Maggie and Brian, who are the co-founders of Asian Hustle Network. They'll give us a little bit of an intro. Both are super passionate about bringing together communities of like-minded individuals, and I'm so honored to be able to be working with them. So Maggie and Brian, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, super excited for you guys to be here today. This is a very topic that we always want to present in the Asian Hustle Network. We're super excited to have this event, and we really want to normalize mental health conversations within not only our community, but the Asian community as well. Growing up, it was extremely difficult for myself to talk about mental health with my parents or any other people, including my peers, because in our community, it doesn't seem to exist, But the fact is they do exist, and a lot of us feel like sometimes we're alone. We can't deal with the problem, or we can't talk to anyone, and we don't want anyone to ever feel that way anymore. So we decided to come together as a team and find experts like Jeanie and all these great people around us to put together a mental health event to have these conversations and normalize them.
Yeah, and so I wanted to thank all of you guys for joining our fireside chat today. I think this is a topic that is not talked about often. And, during a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, we're still expected to wake up every single morning with a smile on our faces, to perform at our very best. And it's hard to do that with, everything that's going on in the world. And it's safe to admit that, it's hard to do that. And so I, have a very similar story to Brian's as well. My parents had never talked to me about mental health. And I think that's very common in Asian families because they don't think that it exists in most cases, right? And so there is a lot of negative attitude and stigma related to mental health and mental illness. And so we just wanted to say that, for you to join this webinar, just to be interested in the topic, it already shows a lot of strength in yourself to, talk about mental health and to, navigate conversations around it. And so, in AHN, we really want to create that safe space and, allow you guys to learn more about how to navigate conversations with your peers, your family members about mental health, as well as, make the topic about mental health more comfortable to talk about. So just wanted to thank Jeanie, Angelina, and Steve as well for being on this panel. And wanted to thank Innovate Marketing Group for being an incredible partner for this webinar. Wanted to thank Amanda Ma, Ali, and Danica as part of Innovate Marketing Group. And so we're very happy to partner with them. They are one of the top experience agencies, and during COVID-19, they have been helping a lot of their clients pivot to virtual events with success, from conferences, galas, grand openings, and webinars like these. So they also have events to Go Kits, which offers an immersive experience for the virtual event.
And thank you, Jimmy Quach. I know you're in the back.
Thank you, Jimmy Quach. He is our events manager as part of AHN. So incredibly grateful for you to be a part of the team and help us with these virtual events.
Yeah, you guys enjoy.
Awesome. And I'll go ahead and also introduce one of our sponsors for the event, Steve Lee, who is the co-founder and CEO of Aura Health. I'll give a brief 2-sentence intro on him, and then I want Steve to take it away and give us a little bit more info about himself. So Steve is like I said, co-founder and CEO of Aura Health, who created the Apple award-winning app Aura with over 4 million users. So Aura is like Spotify for mindfulness and sleep that provides personalized meditations, stories, and so much more from the world's best coaches and therapists. So Steve, go ahead.
I'm the co-founder and CEO of Aura. Wanted to thank AHN, first of all, for bringing attention to this important. Thank you all for joining us here today. Started as a kid. I really saw her. So a few years ago, my brother and I joined forces to found Aura, and today we're grateful to be creators of the mobile app Aura. First therapeutic. I'd like to announce our partner with AHN will be offering exclusive discount on their upcoming website and soon to launch marketplace. So please look out for that. And thank you all for having me here again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. So I'll go ahead and we're going to jump into everything in just literally 2 minutes. I just want to first have an overview of what today is going to look like so you all know what you're tuning into. So the first 30 minutes of this discussion will just be predetermined questions between myself and Jeanie, because we wanted to make sure that we touch on some very important topics. And then after that, we'll jump into a 20-minute Q&A session. And so the questions actually come from you all, the audience. And how to submit your questions is either through the Q&A box here in Zoom, or if you're tuning in on Facebook Live, feel free to comment in the chat and we will go through and make sure that we can try to answer those as best as we can. If you want to remain anonymous for whatever reason and you're in Zoom, you can go ahead and change your name just to say anonymous, or any other name that you so choose. We'll be sure to respect that privacy. So let me go ahead and introduce Jeanie Chang. I'm super excited she's here today. Jeanie Chang is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of Your Change Provider, a therapeutic practice founded on solutions and cultural competence and promoting authentic self-care, good mental health, and wellness. Jeanie is an accomplished national speaker for corporate, community, and colleges on topics such as burnout, resilience, mindfulness, trauma, stress, workplace wellness, and mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, and suicidality. Jeanie is also a corporate wellness consultant, executive leadership advisor, and family parenting coach. Lastly, she is the founder and national director of the Self-Care and Wellness Program for the National Association of Asian American Professionals. For her own self-care, she enjoys being outdoors, kayaking, playing tennis, and planning family vacations for her husband and 4 kids. Go ahead, Jeanie, you can go do a quick intro.
Thanks. Of course, from the get-go, I was uncomfortable hearing my bio. So maybe that's my Asian upbringing of trying to be, humble and not really out there in the spotlight. But thank you for sharing that. Just having 4 kids and a husband is enough to promote good mental health for myself. Yeah, I am super humbled. I think, Angelina, that was a word, to be here to talk about something I'm super passionate about. I feel like I'm in such a safe space with fellow Asian Americans that also feel the same way, that have the passion for it, to address the stigma. The more we talk about it, the more we can do that. I am pleased that a place like AHN is addressing this. And I just feel like this is the beginning of a movement toward where I want to see happen, that I've been working on just as a therapist, clinician, parent, fellow citizen of society. So I'm just super blessed to be here. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yes, totally. I echo all of that, just normalizing these conversations with my friends. Like sometimes we just start our conversations with like, oh, like me and my therapist, we talked about this, and, just really making it normal, I think is really going to be a big change. So I'll go ahead and kick us off with the first question. So Jeanie, I'd love to hear how your own story ties into how you broke into the mental health field.
Yes. Okay. So I'll try to cut it short because we want to fit in a lot of stuff. I am, and I'm super proud to say this, I'm a 2nd generation Korean American. I wasn't very proud to say that many years ago. In fact, growing up, I think one of the things I struggled with the most, and we heard it from Brian and Maggie sharing about their background, my identity, right? Who am I? And then fighting with my parents, who was basically the glimpse of the first identity to Korean culture, right? And I didn't think it was the best experience, where a lot of my childhood was fighting that stigma, though I couldn't define it at the time. What's the stigma? Looking perfect, being perfect, listening, doing what you're told. But the key was, very early on, I was very keen on the fact that I could not share my emotions. Like I felt stifled, suffocated a lot. And I'm making my childhood sound bad. It's not bad at all. Loving family, but just very high level of stress and anxiety and just expectations, right? And when I wanted to share anxiety, which I think is so important now, at seeing it as a therapist, from a therapist perspective, I can't imagine how I went through that. I think it was building my resilience, but it, like when you're walking on eggshells. And that's one of the things that I do a lot today with families, especially with my passion being adolescents, teens, students. That's a lot of people don't work with them, or it's difficult to find people that specifically work with that age group because they're not easy. So never say never is what I'm going to say, because I grew up saying never, I'm going to do this, but then everything I said never to, I'm doing. I didn't say never to mental health. However, I thought I'd be a broadcast journalist, though I'm using that skill today, right? Talking, speaking in front of all of you. I went to school to be a broadcast journalist. I did not plan to go into mental health, but over the years, I didn't realize I was practicing mindfulness myself, where I was trying to examine and re-examine my life, going, what's making me happy? Why am I unhappy? What do I want to do? What's my passion? The things that I ask you guys that have a lot to do with our emotional well-being, right? And so I came into this after I became a parent, where I realized my strength, and I'm a solution-focused therapist, and I'll talk a lot about this today, where I was looking at my own strengths, my own skills. What kind of, floated my boat? What was my thing that just brought me a lot of joy? Well, I was working with people, and then also just being able to hear people's stories, but then help them. So I did the normal thing when you leave broadcast journalism. I left it because I was unhappy, and then I said to my parents, "Oh, I'm going to go to business school." But I said that because I did the Asian thing of what makes me look good, what's the next best thing to do? And I should have known better because I was unhappy through business school. I was like, why am I in business school? But I wanted to finish. You know, I had that hustle, the drive to be like, let me be at the top, let me still do it. But I should have known that that wouldn't bring my happiness, joy, especially when the first day of class, I was like, why am I taking finance? This is not what I want to do, but I finished. However, when I was done and I was raising my kids, and I had my kids fairly early on, that's not planned, but again, never say never. I said I never would get married. And yeah, I have 4 kids, ages 13 to 20, which is enough to practice mental health, right? I fell into it thinking, what gives me passion is kind of being at the forefront of breaking through mental health stigma. And at the time, there was not much research. It has blown up since. But even when I was in grad school, I was constantly delving deep for research articles on Asian Americans, mental health, talking about intergenerational, influences, conflict, and trauma. And the research was very slim. So I knew that I was onto something because that's what I was passionate about, addressing that. So now here I am without dating myself, technically my 3rd career, but so thankful that I'm doing this. It's not easy. But it can be very rewarding, which is why I'm doing it. So I know that I'm meant to do this because I'm not in burnout, something I'll talk about, but doesn't mean it's not stressful, right? So that's how I came about today. And my biggest passion I want to share with you is, yes, fighting that stigma. Still, we have made strides, but I still see it a lot in pockets, workplace, in our own AAPI community, my fellow professionals and colleagues, and families, and that's what I'm constantly addressing. So a lot of my work is providing psychoeducation.
Yeah, that's great. Jeanie, thank you so much for giving us a little bit more insight on who you are. I think you're also such an excellent person to bring on because you have such this entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is so relatable to so many of, the people tuning in today. And I think, what I heard a lot too is just constantly checking in with yourself, which I think as like hustlers, entrepreneurs, we need to do in order to make sure that we're connected with ourselves and we're doing, what makes us happy and what can continue to drive us forward. So our next question is a big one, considering the name of our fireside chat today. What is cultural competence?
Yes. So people are probably thinking, okay, that word, I've heard the word before, those 2 words before. The term that most people are probably familiar with, especially if you've been in the field of healthcare or even in mental health as an advocate, you hear cultural competence. Early on in my career, I let it slip once in some of my sessions, and then working with students, I started saying cultural competence. It just came out and I went, oh, wait, no, I meant cultural competence. And I think that was a slip, let me say a Freudian slip, where I wanted to exude. Language is powerful. And you know that in the Asian culture too. Saying the word confidence already exudes some sort of emotion, right? What it is it's founded on my belief of just a 4-way intersection of mental health, our identity, Asian identity, mindfulness practice, and resilience. And those are the 4 factors that I have found in my practice that blend together. And it's a circular process. I would love to say it's linear, like you'll be hitting this first, then you'll be here in your mental health journey, and then here. No, not at all. That's not how identity works. We're constantly shifting depending on the season of life you're at. So that's cultural competence in a nutshell. But it really is to say it's beyond cultural competence. Competence sounds to me, maybe it's the Asian thing, not good enough. I want people to put it into practice. It's a state of being, a state of living, and intentional. So that's what that looks like. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a really good explanation. I've heard cultural competence a lot as well, but I like, your transformation of the word confidence, because I think, language is very powerful and we have to be very intentional about, the way we speak and what we use to identify, our emotions and identities. So I want to actually ask you this question because you kind of touched on it a little bit before. And I think just with the audience we have today, especially, during a pandemic, I'd love to hear more about what you think we can do to identify, manage, and recover from burnout, which is obviously very prevalent in us entrepreneurs, and how we can balance relationships with work.
Yes. First of all, it is a constant process. And I want to make something clear because I wanted to share this because it's misunderstood. By the way, mental health that term can be misunderstood, which is why there's stigma. We're not talking about mental illness. Those two are different. Mental health is the health of your mind, so your emotional, psychological, and social well-being, something that we think about every day, especially in the workplace, right? I would say burnout happens when you have actually it's a certain state. And I've also had my own previous experience with it when I was doing something I should not have been doing to look good, do the corporate thing. Stress, we're very well aware of. It can overwhelm us. It definitely doesn't make us feel good. It can consume us, but we're aware when we're stressed out and anxious, and it comes out in behaviors, thoughts, and our emotions. However, burnout, sometimes we're not aware we're in that state. What it looks like is a state of, I want to say, disillusionment, disengagement, cynical. And why I'm bringing this up, especially for entrepreneurs, and by the way, I also say I'd never been an entrepreneur. Yeah, and then I have my own private practice now, so I'm an entrepreneur. But you're always thinking about your business, right? And the passion of why you started something. Stay there, because burnout can happen when you start saying, when all of a sudden everything becomes like negative, when you're cynical, and you assume, oh, Angela does something for me. Why did she do something for me? I think she wants something out of me. That's like a cynical thought, right? That doesn't normally come from stress. That's the state of burnout where your core values went into question. And that's just the concept that, again, I'm not claiming to be an expert on burnout, but that's my process of it. It's beyond the stress. However, I want to make clear there's no timeline to it. People think you could be in burnout like after 10 years on the job. No, you could enter burnout 2 days on the job. That was me. Where all of a sudden I started questioning, becoming cynical, going, this is not for me. And then I went into burnout. That's not stress, right? So you're very well aware of stress, and you're super anxious, and you know what's happening. Burnout, most people don't see it until someone points it out, going, gosh, you're just not fun to be around. Or what happened? I thought you loved your job. I thought you loved running this business. That's, if you start hearing that from other folks, it might be a sign of, well, what's in my language? Am I saying cynical things? Do I seem completely detached and disengaged? That's where I would say that would be burnout. So again, that's the question. It's rooted in our core values, why we do what we do. It's not stress, and they can be misunderstood. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So how would you suggest for folks to manage and recover?
Yes. Thanks for that. Okay. So let's go into being solution focused. And it's exactly what it sounds like, but that's what I promote. Focus on what's working. So solutions, or finding solutions to the problem. Our human nature is to go right to the negative. Who's not doing what you're not doing, what's going wrong. Oh my goodness. And you know what happens? It magnifies and it consumes you. And that's all you can look at. Meanwhile, there's a lot of things that are great that could be going on that you completely ignore. So it's a shift in perspective that I would say to manage your burnout is to literally ask questions like, what are the things that are going well? Yeah, XYZ is definitely not working, but you know what's working well? B is working well. And then expand on that, and then hone in on the strength. And guess what happens? When you hone on a strength, then you look, especially entrepreneurs, you look at the strength you have and you build on it. You're like, okay, well, this is where we're making money. This part of the product or whatever that looks like, this service. So let's add more of it. Or let's keep going with this and maybe take out the ones that are not doing well. So that would be being solution focused. Another one is looking at exceptions to the rule. And you've heard that, exceptions to the rule. So exceptions to the problem. When are you not feeling disillusioned or just completely moping around? Or actually, burnout can show signs of depression. And depression, again, to be clear, is not just moping around being sad and, oh, woe is me. It's actually frustration and irritability and anger to come out like that. And when you see that, ask yourselves, wait, when am I not this way? And maybe it's a slim chance of, when I'm not this way. Sometimes I hear this. When I'm not this way, Jean, is when I'm sleeping. I get that. Okay, so then you need more sleep, just like use Steve's app, right? But there are times, I guarantee, when you're not feeling this way, and that's when I need to hone in on, be like, it's because it's when I'm not working 10 hours a day. Actually, when I have a shorter work day, gosh, I find a difference in who I am. That is what I would say is how you manage burnout. That's what you do. What's already working. Search for solutions, look for exceptions to the problem, and also don't focus on past experiences. I know that our past experience can teach us a lot, so I'm not denying that. However, look at the present moment, what's going on in the here and now, which is the only thing you can control, to gain the future you want. And so even asking, what's the future that I want? What's the ending that I want? That helps you formulate goals toward that.
That's really great. I feel like I learned a lot because I know for myself after 5 months of quarantine, I feel like I'm finally hitting this burnout wall. And so something I've been discovering for myself as well is this super radical idea of rest and of just like taking breaks. And just like exactly what you said, noticing how your body and how your mind feels, and just really recognizing that and listening to yourself, because our bodies are very intuitive. So that was really great. I really appreciated that. Thank you, Jeanie. So the next question I have for you, which I know you also kind of touched upon this, and I think is so important for us as Asians and Asian Americans. So how can we navigate conversations with our Asian parents around mental health?
Yes, which some of us struggle with well into adulthood, right? I would say this. The key first is to understand, being solution focused, because I'm going to go on that. What is the end result you want from a conversation to talk about mental health? And when I ask that, going, okay, so why is this important to you? They're like, well, because my parents make me mad, or whatever that is. I go, no, you. What do you want to see by talking to your parents? And do you know how many times people are like, I just want them to see my point, whatever. I go, that's fine, but I need more specifics. Like, I actually want them to just listen for a 15-minute conversation and not say anything, and that would be huge. So you know those SMART goals that we talk about, making sure they're measurable, attainable. Go in with a specific goal each time. A lot of us want to, here's what I say, a lot of us want to attack this conversation with our parents and talk about decades worth of intergenerational conflict and trauma, right? And then bring it all up. You know, that's first of all shocking to your own parents. Mental health, also understanding the culture. First, understand the culture they're at, right? They grew up in whatever country they're at that doesn't even talk about it. America is probably the most forward thinking, I would say, on that, but still, even then we're struggling, right? So look at where they're from, their acculturation stress that they have. I'm saying that first because that helps to develop the empathy, and the intergenerational trauma they've also experienced by coming to a new country, then raising you, right? So look into that. And then once you have that gauged in, then you can say, okay, my goal is to actually, not argue, that they don't argue once. I can get through a conversation about, hey, I'm anxious, or dad and mom, I think you suffer from depression. Here's what depression is. That's my next step. Please don't go in blinded, not being able to explain what you're talking about. Meaning, if they go, what's depression? Be able to explain it exactly the way you can explain it, even if you pull out Wikipedia or Google or get some advice from a therapist. Share it well from the get-go. So a lot of conversations have gone poorly because lots of things were brought up. We're not examining, and Angelina, you said it so well, examining our own emotions before going in. We have to be able to present it well to our parents. Anxiety is contagious. So if you're coming in escalated, which COVID-19 has done to all of us, but you're coming in escalated, already anxious, guess what? From the get-go, they feel your anxiety and they're like, oh, I don't think I can hear what she's about to say because I'm super anxious. So that's why there's a lot of or I would say introspection first, and then know exactly what it is you want in one conversation at a time. That's what I mean by SMART goals, right? You cannot attack them all at once. You have to go one step at a time. That's why I keep saying this is a process. You could be here, then go to here and go back to here. But as long as you're aware of that, you're constantly taking care of your mental health. And again, okay, so I'm going to be clear. I'm diverting a little bit, but I want people to understand mental health, emotional, psychosocial, social well-being. It's important every stage of life. It correlates through all of us all the time. Mental illness, not everybody has a mental illness. 1 in 5 do, so it's pretty common, but we're not talking about mental illness when we're talking about mental health. I hope I'm making sense. And then wellness is a way of life. I say that because it's very much misunderstood in the AIPI community, let alone our parents. So if it's misunderstood by us, then I'm pretty sure our parents would not understand it either. So give them some grace too. But I'm saying this after years of work. So I want to be clear. I think Brian said expert. Sometimes I cringe when I hear that word because it's the imposter syndrome or the Asian thing going, oh, then I better live up to it. I am constantly learning myself, even in my own journey as a parent. When my kids call me Tiger Mom and stuff like that, I'm like, what? No. And then I think of that as when I deal with other parents, I'm learning constantly as well what my journey looks like. So I'm in it with you guys as well. Just maybe I have some more training. But I hope I answered that question on how to make the conversation with parents.
I think you did. And I think what you said resonated a lot with me too, which is, I always see life not as like a linear journey. And I think sometimes we think that way, but, like you said, you're in your third career, it's not just like set and done. Like we are, leaders of our own life, and there's ups and downs, twirls, you can go backward, you can go forward. And that's just like the beauty of all that is how we live. So I also want to do just a quick time check. I know we're at the 30-minute mark. So folks, if you have questions, related or unrelated to what Jeanie has already talked about, feel free to submit it in the Q&A box on Zoom or in the Facebook chat. And if you're on Zoom, you can submit a question as anonymous if you don't want your name attached. So I think it's time to jump into the Q&A section.
Sure.
So speaking a little bit more about, the conversations we have with our parents, some people submitted questions that are a little more specific, but I think are also important to talk about within the API community. So I'd love to hear about, your thoughts or ideas on how to discuss with the Asian American adoptee population, especially like transracial, how maybe those like discussions can happen. And then also somebody did ask about parents coming from more third world countries.
Yeah, those are both hard questions. I would say I have limited experience with transracial, but in my experience and just understanding, first of all, every transracial experience person, adopted experience is very different, right? And I want to make clear, everything I'm sharing, by the way, doesn't mean it may not work always for you. We're unique persons, and it's important to understand what identifies with us. But talking about transracial adoption, there's a lot of factors there. That's starting early on in your journey of maybe not attaching to your birth parents, first of all, and then, they're transitioning of going to home, depending on what you have. Some trauma may have to be dealt with. So I think mental health is so much very important all the time, but perhaps in understanding transracial experiences, understanding their identity, the identity crisis that they might have that looks different than people like us, where, it was somewhat clear cut for me, Korean American, didn't like being Korean, that kind of thing. I think it's very important for transracial persons to understand what identity, it's their identity, have them embrace it. So choose where you identify with, who you identify with. And this is why when I talk to adoptive parents, and there are a few I said, how close are you to bringing in your son's birth country or Chinese culture with your Black culture? Like, how do you mix that? And they're like, oh. And so I think that's very important for the adoptee to be recognized for where he or she was born. I think that's very important because that attachment is psychological. Your identity, by the way, is a psychological attachment, right? And that's why I talk a lot about it. And that's actually what we all have struggled with, our own identity. So even more so being adopted, I would say, please figure out where you really want to reside in. It's up to you. And we all say race and ethnicity, by the way, race and ethnicity, they're not biologically defined. That's what people claim, but they're not. So you can define your own identity. I don't identify with American or Chinese, or, and even though I'm adopted and I'm Chinese, that's not how I identify. Then choose how you want to identify. This is my business background, marketing. How you market yourself shows your confidence. So if you're already timid about, I'm adopted, then guess what? We see that and then we think, okay, so he or she is already struggling with their identity. But if you come across going, I was adopted from China, but the way I identify is this, I am American. And saying it that way, first of all, builds your cultural confidence, just speaking like that. And then everyone else around you accepts it because you're telling them how you want to be identified. So a lot of that would be identity, and mental health, by the way, is a practice. So it's a constant, authentic self-care. By the way, authentic self-care just means your a way of living, your intentional, what your value system is, what you do every day, living your life so you don't need to escape your life. That's true self-care. Not escaping your life, right? Not feeling like, let me go on this vacation to escape it. Then I would say that's not self-care. Actually, self-care is what are you doing every day? Living into your values every day to do that. So on that end, I hope I answered that question. And then I think you talked about parents of third world countries. That's a tough one because even more so, they have limited resources to education. They tend to be low SES. So mental illnesses there may be more prevalent. And so mental health conditions prolonged can lead into mental illness. So I think if you are trying to address that or getting your parents help is what I'm assuming, or just bringing light to it. And usually I see it because they want to get their parents help. They're like, you're suffering from this. We need to get you help. Think about speaking in their language of terms. Okay, I'm going to bring up a K-drama reference. So it's like when you watch K-dramas, there's a lot of slang terms that you learn in the Korean language. I need you to speak your parents' language. What language would help them? Therapy might not, they might not even translate therapy. I don't even know the word for therapy in Korean. I'm sure somebody else would know, but speak the language of, oh, you're talking one-on-one with a clinician or a provider, and not say medical provider because then you're misleading them. Why I'm saying this is because parents are more apt to go to their physicians, like medical doctors, than therapists. And I'm not saying you're trying to fool them. You're trying to just reach to their level of what's comfortable for them. Otherwise, if they're not comfortable, how are they going to, create change with you or change, right? So think of the language that they want to hear and present it to them. So I'm using a lot of marketing skills. So I guess my business degree got me somewhere.
Definitely. And I think we can all relate to that being more like business minded and oriented. I think you're totally right with, having to speak their language, because if they're the ones not willing to listen to you, you have to meet them where they're at. And it's a little bit more on your onus, which isn't necessarily fair. It's just the reality of how these conversations go.
I like that you said that. It's definitely not fair. It's harder. But if you, people have said this, if you pursue your own happiness, actually, you may not find yourself happy. However, if you pursue happiness with others, you can ultimately find your own. So what I'm saying is everything in our emotional well-being, there's studies out there. I mean, we could do a whole thing on mindfulness. Relationships, the quality of your relationships is key to having good mental health. So if we're talking about parents, that's why we're such an angst, right? When parents stress us out, when our family drives us nuts, when we're trying to fight racism in the family, that's another topic, and just getting them to understand, of course, you're filled with this angst, but just understand, accept that you're feeling this anxiety and going, okay, this is what I'm going to feel. This is what I'm going to do. When am I not feeling this way? When are my parents listening to me? The solution focused perspective of what is working? Let me hold on to it. And someone even said, you know what works when I talk to my dad about race? When he's petting our dog. And I go, okay. So then that's when you bring up racism, when your dad's petting the dog. And he's like, okay, good point. Then you're just, like I said, look for those windows. It takes some work, but the results, or, at the end result you want will be what gives you that happiness, right? I like using happiness.
Yeah. Yes. Strategizing these conversations. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question that we have here, which I think is pretty pertinent considering, what we're going through right now with COVID and the quarantine. So how do we break the stigma of mental health in our workplace? And how do we address mental health to those who might not believe in them?
So this is where education comes in. And I threaded it throughout because I don't know if some of you out there have understood when I said what mental health is and heard it, because I was distinctly saying that. This is a lot of my work addressing mental health stigma in the workplace. I would say this, if you want to do some research, we heard that a lot when racism came out earlier on this summer, right? Do your research, read up on it, understand what it looks like. Same thing with mental health. It's about being proactive. And Angelina, I know you were saying, well, it's not fair that we have to work this hard. But that when you work, when you get used to the work, it's like making it a habit, being proactive and not being reactive, which is what we are most of the time. That's the same thing with workplace wellness. So when you're in the workplace and there's stigma, I'm not asking you to completely be vulnerable, be like, hey guys, I'm taking a mental health break because I'm completely depressed. I mean, this is you can say whatever you want. However, there's ways to address it. I think number one is to find the support people. You can't do it alone. Who said that? Brian. Alone is tough. That will actually bring you down more. Find the people, your allies basically at work, who also want to share, you know what, Jeanie, I have the same problem with anxiety and stress. I also struggle. And then I feel really, I don't want to tell HR. Speak with them about it. And I guarantee there are people who are willing to talk about it. There are, but you got to find those people. But I would also say educate, saying, by the way, mental health, oh, I think you're referring to mental illness. This is where we have to be bold. I'm going to associate it with being a bystander for racism. You want to be bold and saying, hey, that's not cool, right? Also, don't be a bystander here in mental health. Be like, wait a second, no, I think you're misinterpreting mental health. It's just simply your emotional well-being. It's something we think about. I mean, say it in the best way and not be like, you idiot, right? There's a way to present it, but I'm associating both because I think racism has been huge this year, and that's why I'm talking about that, and that's the best example I can give you. But just know, it takes time to change. The first response to change is resistance. You're not going to get, oh, sure, yeah, we have stigma, let's change things. No, it's going to be like, what are you talking about? Take your time with that. And I think your other part was people who don't believe in it, then I would say you present them with the data. A lot of my job, just so you know, that can be stressful for me is that I'm constantly trying to be a trailblazer to talk about, from especially corporate, when they're like, when I see those faces on Zoom or in person, they're like, yeah, I don't know what she's talking about. Why is she here, right? I have to face that. I've gotten much better with not looking at that and just delving deep into my passion of why I'm doing this. But you're always going to see the skeptics. However, the more sense you make when sharing it, check your emotions, but be like, no, this is what it is. And this is wellness, the way of living. And the mental illness is what you kind of see sensationalized in the movies, that's mental illness, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what we talk about every day, which is the stress of a job. And that affects my mental health. So it comes from you. How you adjust the stigma, and believe it or not, we have our own stigmas, right? How we see our biases, our implicit bias. Check yourself. What's your implicit bias? Maybe you also look down on somebody going, oh my gosh, she's having a panic attack. Watch that. And then how can you expect for workplace stigma to change when you yourself also have that? So going back to the introspection has to start with us.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important. You're totally right with it starting with you. And to the person who submitted that question, I just want to say, like, I totally relate and can empathize. I feel like even when I was working in the mental health field, I didn't feel safe talking about my own like mental health and mental well-being, just because it's like something you see every day and it somehow is still stigmatized. But I think it's just starting with yourself first and finding those coworkers, advocates, allies to have those conversations. Okay, cool. So we definitely have some more questions. I also want to encourage people to submit their questions in the Q&A box on Zoom and on Facebook Live. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I love to see the variety of questions that we have here. So Jeanie, I think the next one, which maybe you can relate to as well, is talking about parents right now, especially with kids. And so how to navigate, both your mental health and their mental health in the world we're living in right now.
Parents have said to me, I get very irritated when I hear the word investing in self-care. And I'm like, why do you get irritated with that? Because what I'm trying to get at is self-care. And I like to use the word authentic. I'm going to keep using that word because it's not used words a lot in the Asian, especially in the AAVA community. They hear that, they're like, that's authentic self-care is what parents need to engage in. It is not selfish. It's self-full. So number one thing, you have to, parents, me, myself as a parent, put your oxygen mask on first. You know that when you're traveling and they tell you on a flight, hey, if you're traveling with a child, put yours on first, then help your child, when God forbid that happens. Or if you're with somebody who needs assistance, you put your mask on first, then put on theirs. That's the concept I'm going to say to you. Your kids feel your stress and anxiety. So and usually it shows in acting out, especially little kids, not listening, doing these little things. You're like, why are you doing this? Well, they're reacting to your stress. Again, anxiety is very contagious. So figure out with you, hey, what works for you? Well, self-care is a daily practice. It's about, perhaps, Angelina said it well, letting things go. Maybe it's I've decided I'm going to stop yelling at the kids when they fight, which I've heard more happens, right? Siblings in the house together. You know what I'm going to do is that's not the battle I'll pick. I'm going to pick the fact that whether or not they're doing their online school or they're not learning, I'll focus on that. And the fight, I've decided to let go. That is actually authentic self-care. Deciding the boundaries that you're going to put in place for your own emotional, psychological, social well-being. And then please, parents, please also understand that you have to be proactive. Especially now in COVID, my biggest concern is coming out of this. People are like, oh, this will get better. Of course it will get better. But by then, you may be in burnout. We need to now take care of ourselves to think for the sake of our kids, how they're going to be. And dealing with, kids going to college, oh my gosh. I mean, there are times that I'm constantly breathing, literally, so I don't hyperventilate, freaking out about them going to campus. I don't know what that looks like. Even though it's virtual, they're still on campus. It's very stressful. So I also relate. But I make sure even then, again, being self-full, taking care of myself. Again, it's not about eating bonbons on the sofa. I mean, I don't know how that image came about. It's about mindfully doing things or taking things out to have healthy boundaries in place, being flexible and acknowledging your stress. Being, you know what, I'm stressed. Okay, so let me talk to my partner and spouse. That will help me. That's self-care. And then discussing together, okay, what's going to help you? You know what? Blah, blah, blah is driving me nuts with the kids, whatever. And let's face it, I'm going to say this. This is not going to help you. You might be like, oh my gosh. Accepting your anxiety helps you disengage from it. Think of it as like a leech. You're like constantly trying to pull it off, peel it off. When you sweep anxiety under the rug, oh, it's not there. By the way, that's very prevalent in the Asian American community. We don't see anxiety. We're not anxious. It blows up in your face. And then it snowballs, and then something happens. And actually, I mean, I know we're not talking about this, but that's pretty much what happened with racism this year. Shoving it under the rug until finally, with COVID escalating us, it broke out. It had to happen, but that's what I'm talking about. I don't want that happening in your family. We can manage that in our authentic self-care practice and what that looks like. So very much essential. When parents say, it irritates me when I hear self-care, I think you're misunderstanding self-care. That's what I would say.
Right, exactly. I think what I'm hearing from you a lot, Jeanie, is just like redefining what these words mean for you, reimagining it so it benefits you. And yeah, just, having it, defining it for yourself and not letting anybody else dictate like what that looks like for you. So that's really important.
Here's the other thing with parents, self-care could also mean connecting better with them, your kids. So it might mean, hey, not having your phone on for the last, 6 hours of the day from 5 to 10 p.m. or something. That's 5 hours. I can't even do math. And just deciding that's my self-care, not because of me. So I'm connecting with my kids. That's self-care. So there's many ways to define it, but I just feel like things are misunderstood a little bit, misconceived. And that's where also stigma can come into play.
Yeah.
Question.
This next question isn't necessarily mental health, but I think it's very parallel to what we all experience and does contribute to mental health. So somebody asked, what are your thoughts on how to reconcile conflicting cultural values as an Asian American person? So for example, between our generation and maybe the generation above us, fulfilling your authentic joy, your authentic self versus filial piety. So, feeling devoted to, fulfilling your parents' dreams or, making them happy. So how do you balance that?
And that you just said it, you do have to balance it. As much as I'm talking about self-care and being authentic to yourself, as an Asian American, growing up in Korean American, my parents' influence was strong. And I always like to tell people, by denying your upbringing, completely resenting it, is actually saying something about how you feel about yourself. So I try to reconcile it by saying, you know what? I did resent being Korean. They were very hard on me, maybe tiger parent like, but who I am today, I'm happy with who I am today. I hope most people can say that, or you're working to say that. And that means you are accepting the filial piety role that they filled for you, right? So there is a constant balance. You also need to work, fulfill your passion. What do you want to do? I'm in mental health. Do you know how, my father, is a physician. He's pretty smart. But when he sometimes he's like, so I'm sorry. So like, what do you do? Like you talk to them and are you like doing yoga and stuff? That's literally what he said. because I'm talking mindfulness, he's thinking yoga, right? Which is also a part of mindfulness, but the way he's saying it, I went for a very educated person. He doesn't quite get that as well. I had to fight myself through that. They didn't deny me that. By then I was well into adulthood. But I also think, let's face our own shame and guilt that the cultural, what I say, norms that we grew up with, let's reconcile that first. What is it that you're feeling? Yeah, Jeanie, I'm feeling guilty because I feel like it's constantly in my mom's voice. Well, then I would say to you first, how do you not feel guilty? I think a lot of people bring their parents into, they almost like can't, they like cleave to the parents thing when I'm saying, hey, there's a great way to separate. You can actually externalize this and go, okay, here's the problem. The problem is guilt, the shame, not my mom. That's just a method I want to say. The person generally is not the problem. I mean, we could argue that, but the person's behavior is what we're talking about, or what comes out of that, or the language, what they're doing is what we have a problem with. But we can't separate it sometimes. We just see mom and then whatever they're doing. So please reconcile first what it is. Put a name to it. Is it anxiety, guilt, shame, perfectionism? What's going on with you? Otherwise, no wonder you can't reconcile them. Hopefully I'm not sounding harsh, but I see that in a lot of people. That takes me constant time. I'm constantly triggered by my parents too. When I see them calling, I'm like, okay, do I look okay? I mean, because I know my mom's going to say something about me, right? Or how washed out I look or something. And that's the Asian thing, pointing things out critically speaking. But even I have to make sure, all right, let me make sure that I'm okay to accept this conversation. I've learned to balance that and accept that's just the way they are. You can't change somebody. You can definitely change you. And people can change, but you can't change them. So I want to say, change how you relate to your parents first, change what it is that, that's triggering you, as in change your response to it, figure that out. And then you'd be able to figure out, I do want to pursue this. I'm going to be so definitive in telling my parents. And then being solution focused when you're telling your parents, being not fulfilling that filial piety, here's a practical step. Don't go in telling them you don't want to do something. Go in telling them the strengths, like, hey, mom, dad, I am not going to Harvard Business School. Don't do that. Say, mom, dad, guess what? I got recruited by a top-notch entrepreneur to start this product that could make $1 million, speak their language about money. So I think it's best for me to follow this route because I can build on this. I'm really good at marketing. You're going to bring in your skills, and they hear that. When they hear, I'm not going to med school, I'm not doing this, I don't like, then the defensive walls come up and they will not listen. You won't even get past the first sentence. They'll be like, nope, this is what you have to do. So a lot of it has to stem with how we're coming into the conversation. Start with your strengths. Solutions, what do you want? I want my parents to accept my field, that what I'm doing is what I want to do. Then go with that. I love what I'm doing, mom. Oh yeah, just how you love doing this. Me too. I love being in the field of psychology. And now I'm, speaking and doing this. Isn't it great? I'm being really successful. Speak their language.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I see it as like almost like priming them.
Yeah, see, I'm using a lot of business skills, right? A lot of
Yeah, exactly. Good. So I know we're coming close on time. I think there's just one more question I want to ask you. If we can get like a 2-3 minute answer, I think that this will be very actionable for people. I'd love to hear maybe you or what you recommend to people on how to manage stress, different modalities that you can manage stress and or burnout.
First of all, find, and yes, I am not claiming to be an expert on everything. This is what I do, but different modalities work for different people. I'm talking from a solution-focused perspective. So I'm going to say to you, this is not all peachy keen. It's tough work. I struggle with it daily on how I manage my stress. First of all, number one step, identify it. That's what you're feeling. Do you know how many times that we don't even know what we're feeling? I'll even ask, what's making you stressed out? They're like, I'm not stressed. I'm like, or what's stressing you out? Oh, I don't know what's stressing me out. Be able to name it, label it. Here, people say, oh, labels are bad. In mental health, I want you to label your emotions. Mm-hmm. I want you to acknowledge them. That's step one. And then step two is accepting it. And then 3, the skills that I want to say that are number 1, and I can't demonstrate all of them, but deep breathing. I always talk about that, and people are like, yeah, we heard this before. Hey, I was the biggest skeptic. I was like, why would anybody deep breathe? I'm too busy for that. Well, guess what? Why do you exercise? When when you exercise, you have the endorphins. It's because you're breathing, regularly to, lift weights or whatever. You see your mind getting clear. We need to deep breathe to give oxygen back to our brain that stopped thinking when you're stressed out. It just shuts down because you're holding your breath. Oh my gosh, I'm really stressed out. Or you're hyperventilating, right? That's not doing well for your brain. So the first step, I think, say in anxiety management is deep breathe. And we could talk about what that looks like, but square breathing, there's many methods. If you have to Google them, there's many. I can say there's tons of great ones, but learn what it means to deeply like inhale and exhale slowly. And then the other thing is think about your own strategies of taking care of yourself daily. Again, it's being proactive. So you might be doing well. Then I'd say, awesome. Keep that up. But how are you keeping that up? Because when life throws you a little wrench, then I don't want you to be reactive. You'll already be taking care of yourself. Now, I built a tolerance. I'm ready to handle this. Okay, my business is going under. I mean, that's something bad, but you're like, I got this. This is what I'm going to do because I've been taking care of myself. So it's a very diligent practice. That's what cultural competence is about, understanding those intersections, mental health, identity, mindfulness, resilience, building all those up and intersecting them constantly into a circle.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeanie. I know we're coming up on time, so those are really great suggestions on what we can actively do to, overcome and manage our stress and burnout. As you were saying, deep breathing, I totally thought of Aura, the health app from Steve, our sponsor. I've used them before, and it like motivates you, and it tells you to do like deep breathing and walks you through it. So I know for some people meditating is really hard because sitting with our own thoughts is really scary. So you're like, let me just have someone else talk to me and walk me through this like breathing exercise. So I'll go ahead and start just doing closing remarks as we are ending our fireside chat. So again, Jeanie, thank you so much.
Fast. We'll do
I know, right?
No, I'm kidding. Not another hour.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, and your experience. I don't take any of it for granted, and I don't think anyone here does either. It's definitely helped me a lot today. It's what I needed to hear. I also want to thank, obviously, our host, Asian Hustle Network, for, having the courage to host a conversation like this, and also Innovate Marketing Group. Amanda Ma, Danica Schwartz, Ali Rodman, they were pivotal in planning this with us. And then finally also, Steve Lee from Aura Health. And just as a plug, so I work with Asian Hustle Network, and we will be releasing our marketplace soon on our website. So if you have not checked out our website yet, it's just asianhustlenetwork.com. Give it a peek. We are so excited to be releasing some stuff soon for our community. And I also wanted to highlight some upcoming events that we have. Yes, Jeanie, she has a QR code because she is smart. So take a screenshot of this, scan it with your camera. If you have an iPhone, you can literally just put your camera up to it and it'll smart boost you to to the internet to get to know more about Jeanie. So get in contact with her if you have any other questions, want to book her for speaking engagements or anything like that. She's great, and obviously you can see she was awesome to talk to. And I just want to also quickly mention some upcoming virtual events we have. So every Thursday we have a social hour at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So for you West Coasters, it's a little bit before the end of the day, so it's fine if you hop on and just answer your emails to your boss when they email you. So that's actually tomorrow because today is Wednesday. September 9th, we have an upcoming Ask Me Anything AMA with Jeff and Justin Wigna, co-founders of Kuju Coffee, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then at the end of next month, September 30th, we have a women empowerment event moderated by Stephanie Harmer, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So I want to just say thank you again to all of our attendees and listeners. Make sure to check out our AsianHustleNetwork.com. It's new. We just launched. We're really excited. And I want to give one last big thank you to Jeanie. And Jeanie, if you want to go ahead and say a few last words, feel free.
Just thank you for having me. I'm glad that we ended on time. That was my biggest fear because I like to talk about this. But thank you, Angelina. It was awesome talking to you. So fun. I felt like we were really doing literally a fireside chat in our room together, even though we're completely on opposite coasts. So the benefit of Zoom. So thanks so much for listening. And yes, you can contact me anytime. Love being here. Thank you, AHN.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time. See ya.